Welcome to the Aaron Warner podcast on iCode Media. Today we've got my good friend, and if you don't know him, where have you been? Because Dave, you're everywhere. And if you don't know Dave by his mug collection, you know him by his myopia podcast. If you don't know him by his myopia podcast, you know him by his all his other work and his lecturing and conferences and whatnot. In fact, Dave, one of my early shining moments was sharing the stage with you at Vision Source. I'm like, I get to lecture with the Dave Kading. So I showed up like me, man. And you had a bow tie on. I'm like, I've completely
you were already a rock
this.
Star by then. You think it was your early days, but you had already made it. You were a stud at that time too.
Well, but so I appreciate that. But what I am not is a published author. And so I'm excited to dive into fresh off the press, The Invisible Team by Dave Kading. But before Dave, I have to give you kudos because I'm not superstitious, but I think that giving somebody a book without writing in it is bad juju. Right? And so if you're going to give a friend a book, at least write something on the inscription. It's kind of like when somebody sneezes and nobody says God bless you. You know, it's just bad juju. So I appreciate the inscription. You were like, that was first thing I looked for. I'm like, sweet, I got the book. Like, did Dave send good juju or bad juju? And very much good. So thank you.
Oh, well, I think I just increased the value by a penny or two. So that's why I wanted to provide value to you, brother.
Yeah. Well, these are personal, right? And it's good stuff in here, and we'll get into it in a minute. But I think that just, when you give somebody something, you've got to at least put your name on it and say, hey, this was from me. If nothing else, it keeps me from like regifting it to somebody else.
That's right. Somebody else wants the book. You can't just give them yours. You got to buy them another copy. That's it.
Exactly. So in all seriousness, before we jump in, for those who do not and have not had the pleasure of meeting Dave Kading, give us the quick rundown of who you are.
Yeah, so I practice in the greater Seattle area. I've got a business partner who is my bride, who is the joy of my life, along with my three amazing daughters. And my quest in the world of optometry is to enrich people's lives so they can succeed to their greatest potential. And by and large, I do that in the arena of specialty care, keratoconus, dry eye, myopia management. I host a residency, which helps keep me on my toes and helps me learning all the time. And when we come across something kind of clever or unique in our practice, I have the opportunity to get to share that with our optometric community around the globe, which has been a lot of fun to travel the world and speak about what we're doing unique in our practice, which tends to be a giving as I am trying to give something back. I learned something from somebody at a conference or a meeting, and then we're able to bring it into our practice and then turn it around, and then I call it mine, and I then share it with everybody else. And so Dr. Mila Brujic and we started partnering together about 15 years ago. We launched a dry eye workshop in the optometry schools 10 years ago this year, and so we like to partner together in a lot of our efforts and have the Optometric Insights podcast and the Myopia podcast, and been doing some really, really cool things and fun things together in that arena. And then I published 2 books last year, which was kind of a new thing for me in the writings arena. And why do one if you could do 2? So that's the world where we're in.
Well, I've never known you to half-ass anything, so kudos to you for whole-assing writing. And what you just said reminds me of my all-time favorite quote, and I think you live it pretty well. It's from Zig Ziglar, who was the original of the let's say self-help gurus. But his quote says, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want. So the more you help others, the more you get back, and the less altruistic you are, it seems like the more blessed we are. So I'm blessed to have you as a friend and mentor, and sharing all your knowledge, which you move up, like gloss over this whole I have a residency. That's a big deal to have a private optometry practice have a residency program. That's not I have a 4th year student come in and I'm teaching them to how to be a real doctor, how to make real decisions and what real life is like. This is big stuff.
It is. It's so much fun, and I learned so much from my resident, and they push us to constantly be better, and we're not turning over somebody every 3 months, we're turning over somebody every year, and so we get the blessing of really diving in with them, and every year is a different residency year because there's something new or something different. We're introducing IPL or radio frequency, and a new myopia management product or something. And so I always share with them that it's not what you're learning here, it's how you learn to implement, which, I think in private practice, you and I both know it's the implementation of things that makes or breaks the good practices, not so much what you bring in, but how you do it. And
Yep.
my hope is that, we prepare them to develop a specialty, because, how we do what we do is going to be different 5 and 10 years from now. So how do we learn that? And that's the hope in my residency, is that they do that. It's a cornea and contact lens residency. Literally was just interviewing a new candidate right before I met with you. So it's a constant cycle. As you bring one in, start it, 6 months later, you're interviewing for the next one.
Wow. So they turn over every summer? Yep. So very cool. Hopefully you find a good one, and hopefully for them they get selected, because I can only imagine what you're going to learn leaving your practice. So, well, let's. You said you wrote 2 books this summer or this last year, and I had the pleasure of reading The Invisible Team, which, quite frankly, I had no idea when you said I'm writing a book and it's called The Invisible Team. I was quite intrigued. I didn't know if this was like a murder mystery, with ghosts, special ops teams. Like you did a good job of just saying, "Hey, I wrote a book," and I said, "Let me read it." It wasn't what I thought it was. It was better, and I felt like I was having a conversation with you the entire time, because the way you write, the way you communicate, you weren't talking at me, you were talking with me. And which I appreciate. I think at least I learn better that way. I think most of us learn better. I feel seen. You initially start talking about some of the challenges that you face in your office, and I've got a lot of notes on the side that said, "Me too, me too, me too." Yep, that happens here. So so I appreciate that. But my first question is, your dedication page just has 2 words, and it says for is it Kadori? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Who's Kadori?
So Kador is my family. So it stands for Christy, Ann, David, Olivia, Ruthie, Ellie. And quick
That's
story
awesome.
of how that came about is we were bringing in a new frame line, and we were trying to think of the names of it. And my assistant and we were just going back and forth in different names, and how could we have my kids' names in it, and whatever it was. And so she came up with Kador, which we, alongside that, put some little mountains in it. So the logo of our in-office frame line that we brought in and we made up on our own, it's an independent line. It's called Cadore, which also is the mountain region, spelled different, but mountain region of Italy, where a lot of the handmade frames were originally came from. So that wasn't something we knew when we came up with it, but and so kind of our branded family name is Cadore. So that's where it's from.
That's if I knew this platform better, I'd push the little "ah" button, the "ah." But that's cool, man.
Thanks, buddy.
That's really cool. So
you're the only
awesome.
person that's ever asked me that.
That makes it even better.
Mm-hmm.
I love reading, and I think you've got to have a conversation with the text. And so now that first page, I'm already bought in. So give us an overview of what the book is.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your compliment in the writing style. That is definitely what I hope to be, and it's essentially a, hey, if we're sitting down having a conversation of things that we're struggling with in our office, here's the things, and I just happened to do quadruple the number of hours of research that I thought I was going to do in the process of writing the book, to find out that we're not alone in eye care. This is the real big issue in small healthcare. Now, big healthcare has its own problems. My local 2 hospitals, they come and speak to my Rotary Club about how many millions of dollars they're losing a year, and they're getting government subsidies to make up for those, but they're losing. They're not in the black. So they have their own problems, but they're uniquely different than us small, because we don't get those government subsidies, right? And we're trying to be owners that are operators and seeing patients as well. So the beef of where I'm writing from is like, I'm just like you. I'm dealing with the same issue, and here's what we've learned. The struggle that really came about with this was how I started notice going into COVID, and I really noticed so much more coming out of COVID, how we couldn't find people to hire. And it wasn't that we had bad candidates. It was by and large that we didn't have candidates. And, you know, I remember the day where we had 20 or 30, 40 candidates that applied for a job. And, you know, now we're lucky if we get 5 or 10. And the ones that we get, they don't show up for the interview. And if they do, you know, they're very likely not great candidates. And if they are, we hire them right away. But we were really seeing that escalate, and that what ended up happening from that is we started noticing how hard our in-office team was having to work to cover the fact that we were understaffed. Mm-hmm. And then you lose somebody because they're overworked, and now everybody else has that growing and increased amount of work and load that they're doing. They're experts in the field because they've been with you so long, and they're the only one who knows it. We hire somebody else to come in, and that person stays for 3 or 6 months, and then they fall away because they weren't a great fit. We kept them longer than we should have kept them because we needed somebody to fill the seat. This was the issue, and in the book I talk about, you know, the 5 pain points that we really encounter, yep, which talks about the talent drain and the payroll, the admin avalanche, all of these different aspects of the government regulations that are on us. And so the epitome of what the book is about is how I solved that utilizing an invisible team of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do a very well that I need to go back to school. You do that very well in the book, and I think that was an excellent summary. I don't want to give away everything that's in the book, because certainly it's, you know, I there's some books that are, hey, that's nice, go listen to the Blinks, you know, the Blinkist version of it, and or find a YouTube summary. This is a read, and it's probably not a read this and pass it on to your partner in the business. Is probably buy 2 copies, because you're both going to have margins full of notes.
That's generous, buddy. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm honest. You know me, right? I'm gonna call a spade. So I definitely appreciate it. What immediately jumped out, and just to kind of tee this up to see where people go, and I went into it again not knowing exactly what I was getting into. Your acknowledgments with talking about our good friend Corey and what he's done, right? I appreciate very much that, and we both know he's fantastic. But you start with a quote, and it says, "Sometimes what transforms care the most is what patients never see." Mm. And I wrote down next to it, from all my Disney education, that backstage is even more important than the show. Yeah. And I think we forget about that. And between you and I, you know, don't tell any of the hundreds of people listening to this. My office, they're wonderful. My team is wonderful. But there's plenty of time, and recently in the last couple of months, it's kind of felt like this a little bit, that we are hanging together by duct tape and bubble gum and hopefully some shoestring, which means somebody's walking around with their shoe flopping around because their shoe's not tied. Patients don't see that. Our reviews are fantastic. But we're feeling that stress and strain. And so that quote certainly resonated with me, because it's the stuff they don't see that stresses us out, stresses my team out. And we're doing a really good job of keeping the show going, but it's not sustainable through that. And so that's part of the, you know, you're talking to me, right? And then chapter or the introduction, right? I don't know if it's chapter 1 or the introduction. You quote, "Sorry, I'll be home soon." And if my wife read the book and that was all she got, it'd have been in front of my face being like, "See, get home. It's not just me."
Yeah. Well, I'm home way more often than I used to be. I still am not home as early as I need to be as often, but way more than I used to be, and it's because we've solved many of these problems.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the point? Why do we have a business at the detriment of our family? Why do we have a business at the detriment of ourselves? It should be the opposite, right? We have a business to enhance our family, to enhance our own lives. And as altruistic as we
an inherent issue that we have is that we love our team and our staff so much that we will sacrifice ourselves and our time
for them
many times to try to see what we can do on the back end. Even though we worked all day and they worked all day, they're working their tails off, and then they go home, and then we tend to stay a little bit longer trying to figure additional things out and try to solve the problems and whatever it may be. And it's just building, and it for many. I heard a practitioner yesterday. I was meeting with her, and she's like, "I'm selling. I'm done. I can't do it anymore." It just broke my heart. I'm like, "Your practice looks great. I love coming in to visit you and see you." And so just those break my heart, and that's what I'm trying to help people with and solve those problems.
Yes, and one of the first underlines I have said, "Here's the truth: you were never meant to do it all alone."
No.
So sometimes we need to hear that.
Yeah.
Because we think that I have to wear I gave myself the fancy title, the founder, CEO, president. It looks good on my LinkedIn profile. What I also forgot to put on there is I'm also janitor, toilet cleaner, light bulb changer, right? And so I liked hearing that. And I know you didn't write this book for Aaron, but I think you did. And so hearing that was super helpful. So, who is this invisible team that we're talking about?
So we in one of these instances of being late, I discovered that we were missing 47% of our phone calls, and so I had to look the next day with my team, and I'm like, "What's going on? Like, how is this happening?" And it's really easy to become frustrated at a statistic like that, but then when you walk up front and you can't get one of your team members to get off the phone long enough for you to ask why they won't answer the phone, you kind of start to realize that maybe there's something else going on, right? The patient who comes in and sees you, and I highlighted this conversation in the book of, she loves coming to see you as the doctor, but she can't stand your staff because they won't ever answer the phone or give her a call back. And meanwhile, we're missing 50% of the phone calls, and I know that my team is on the phone all the time. So this is one of the breaking points for us, and so I came to realize I've been working with a virtual team of people over the last 15 years. I just was getting a text message from one of them in the Philippines who I don't work with her anymore, but I worked with her for about 12 years. She was just incredible, and I didn't bring that over into my clinic. I did it in the consulting side of things, but I said I have to find a way to bring it over to the clinic, and my concern about it was HIPAA. And so we've solved that issue, and that issue is solved by the agency, and the agency is a big part of the book of how you can fail and get a bad agency or a good agency.
Yep.
And so we just kind of worked to how do we develop a virtual mindset? We're not going to try something. We're going to go all in. This is going to be the solution to so many of our problems. There's going to be issues that come up with it, just like anything. But you don't rent an OCT before you start treating glaucoma. I'm going to do this. And we go for it. And just like any innovation or technology we bring into our office, we're going to make it work. It's not that we're going to try it. And so we decided to go all in. And one of the smartest things that I did is I hired 2 people. And I just realized right up front, this isn't going to be easy to train these people because they're not in the office listening all the time to everybody else who's talking to people. So I hired two people, I trained both of them. They both worked out, but they don't always, right? And by doing that, by training both of them, we were able to realize where it was our fault and when it was their fault. Because one of them would do it well, the other one didn't do it well, then it was probably them. Or if both of them were doing something poorly, it was probably that we didn't have our systems in place. And the first thing we offloaded was our phones, and we hired two people, quickly hired a third, and then we quickly moved over to having scribes in the office. And I just sat down with my doctor team, and I'm like, hey, you're going to have a scribe, and your scribe is going to do as much as you'll let him do, and I want him to do more. So there's been conversations along the way of like, are you making them write letters? Are you asking them to order contact lenses? Are you having them send fax? Are you having them do care calls to patients afterwards? And like pushing them to give their scribe more and more of the things that they were holding on to.
Yep.
And that way we could look patients in the eye the entire exam. And, it's great to have in-office people too. And we've had in-office scribes, but we don't, they go off to optometry school or they go do something clinically or they're out of the room, teching for the patient, for the next patient because, somebody else didn't show up for the office and they're getting, and then you don't have a scribe. So I just said, we're going to, have our doctors have a scribe. And so it quickly became 5 and 6 people that we had in the office. Quickly, it was like, oh, wow, this is a whole new team of people that we're adventing to what we have. So that's the invisible team that we started creating. Now we have 10.
Yeah, it's in full transparency. I think I've talked about this multiple times. We have not 10, but we're getting there, and I've got one that helps me specifically. I think the world knows Mariana. In fact, she's easier to get a hold of to get to me than it is to get to me to get to me. Mm-hmm. And but there's so much that we need help with that we're not experts at. And everything you just talked about, there's quite a bit to unpack. The first is, let's just go straight to it, leadership. Some of our colleagues are amazing at being leaders. Mm-hmm. A lot of our colleagues are great at being managers. They're managing a situation, they're not leading it. And my definition difference is, a manager maintains status quo where a leader really kind of breaks status quo and changes what's happening. So when you come in and say, hey, we're going to be giving our phones over to an invisible team. Hey, you are going to have a scribe, right? That's changing status quo. That's leadership. And I think for some practice owners, that's very difficult to do because the first thing you hear back is usually the word no, or I don't like it. I don't want it. I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. What advice if somebody's working through that and they're saying, hey, I want to do this. It sounds good, but I'm afraid of my in-person team.
Yeah.
Right. What's how do you get past that?
Yeah, this number one concern that people have is that everybody's going to think that we're trying to replace them, the in-office team. And there are people in the office who do like to be on the phone or do like to do those sort of things. And so you have to figure that out. And you have to get to a point where you're realizing, where I find you the most valuable and where you bring the value most to us is that face-to-face interaction. And so we had to do it because we were needing to hire more people and we were struggling to hire them and we were going to be struggling with our in-office team. And so sitting them down and saying, hey, listen, and I talk about this in the book, is like, here's the steps that you go through with your in-office team. You're not replacing them, you're adventing them, you're giving them a reprieve, and here's how to go about it. And I talk about one of the employees who had a little pushback on it. And so I went to her, in the book I just detail how I went to her and I said, okay, I want you to tell me the things that we're not doing well and where we're struggling and where you're spending the most time. And let's see how we can work through those things before I even mentioned the virtual team. And then, she could outline them. And I said, okay, I need your help training somebody to do that. And she'd already trained other people. They were just in person. And now she's going to be training the people virtually and being like, okay, we're going to start off with, they're going to answer the phone. They're going to schedule, establish patients. If it's a new patient, they're forwarding into the office. So we started building and having them help develop the SOPs of how we wanted to have it done right. but they can't think about doing process right now because they're so busy and everything is hairy. And so when you can start to give them a little bit of time, they can stretch. And so that's the big thing, is you've got to work with them. And I have a system of how, over the first 30, 60 days of how you're transitioning into that role. And there is a point where if you can't get somebody on your in-office team to be accepting of it, they probably are a little bit stubborn in other areas, and it may be time that you have to help that person transition out of your office.
Yep. I use the analogy in my office all the time of sports teams. It's if you're a pocket quarterback and you've got an offensive coordinator who likes to have a running quarterback, it's probably time for a transfer. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or the team. It just means it's probably time for a transfer. And look, Drew Brees, did a whole lot better once he left San Diego than when he did when he was with us. So we like to claim credit, but I'm not New Orleans. So it's not always a bad thing to transition. It's not a bad thing to try to build your team properly, how you are. Although I'm curious, because you made the comment that you have in-office people who like to be on the phone. I have yet to find an in-office person who likes to be on the phone with the type of phone calls that they need to be making. They love to be on the phone with their friends.
No, correct you. I didn't say I had anybody in my office. I said somebody may in their office. I haven't found that to be the case, but there could be. There could be people.
There could be.
We did have a particular individual where we were telling her she needed to stop answering the phone so much and let it kind of divvy up, because we were seeing that she was the one answering the phone all the time. This was years ago. She wasn't the best at it, but she was the one who was like, she always wanted to be on the phone, like picking up the phone and like the person. And she was our main front desk person. And so we're like, hey, you got to stop answering the phone. Let other people pick it up. Like if nobody picks up by the third ring, you can pick it up. But there are people that are just like, they got it, right? Yep. And so, you got to move that along.
Yep. No, it's okay. Well, that makes me feel better, because like the phone is so valuable in every consultant I ever listened to, which I'm convinced some of the consultants just got me to pay them money to tell me stuff that isn't possible, but I felt like I failed, so I would need to keep paying them until I got it right. One of them, somebody said the phone prints money. I'm like, no, the phone just interrupts life. But I've never found a good phone person, so I feel better. In person. Invisible team. I have great people on the phone, and because that's what they're good at, and their success rate is significantly better than our in-house team. So I like the idea too. You talked about how you worked with your team member, and when I look at AI, when I look at all the different technologies that are coming, and people are afraid of their job, and I'm sure when the first autorefractor was mass produced and we can buy it, somebody was afraid that they were going to lose their job because they could no longer have a string attached to their retinoscope that was going to be used 20 times a day. But I'm half in jest, but I think that, we're not losing jobs. We're just becoming significantly more efficient, which allows us to do a lot more. You started this talking in your residency about all the new things we're doing. My dad in practice wasn't doing OCTs. In fact, he graduated with diagnostics. He was super excited to be able to use diagnostics. Right? So are you seeing that in your world too, that is with technologies, with help, like you're able to just advance more?
Yeah, well, there may be a day where I'm like, hey, we don't need these in-office people. I can't imagine that we're going to be able to provide quality level care with less people than we have now. Unless a robot is doing all the pre-testing and is nicer and people like the robot way better than, my incredible technicians, I just can't see that sort of thing happening. But I can see that as innovations continue to come around and, artificial intelligence may improve, that we may augment and may not hire another person if somebody leaves and find a way to bring something else in. But I think we still need the number of people. Now, here's an interesting component of that that's not quite AI, but it's not quite virtual as well, is like a virtual kiosk. Patient walks in the door, then the virtual person pops up on a screen. It's like, hey, right over here, I'll check you in for your appointment, and give me your credit card, and here's a form I need you to sign. Just go ahead and sign on the screen. So those are some things where we may be bringing virtual people even into the office in some ways, and I'm just always looking for how we have more people with more patients more of the time, as opposed to leaving patients by themselves or have them standing waiting in line for the next person at the front desk when it's a quick swipe of the credit card or whatever it is. So I think that'll bring about better quality of care. I don't think anybody's going to complain if they're able to get out of the office a little bit quicker by swiping their card with a virtual person who's really friendly and smiling and is a professional, versus that person who was busy checking out the last patient. So, but AI may be capable of doing that in the future, but I think it's gonna be a while before we're really fully augmented into that. I think humans are still gonna want to deal with humans.
I don't just recommend Peak Pro to my patients. I use it daily, and so does my whole family. Honestly, it's one of those rare products my wife and daughters all love. So much so they actually fight over who stole the tea tree cleanser, the peptide cream, or even the hyaluronic acid. I had no idea this would be the case when I introduced them to the Peak Pro products. But I've learned they're a great company to work with, and their lineup covers everything from daily eyelid hygiene to deep hydration. I highly recommend checking them out. We've got a special affiliate link in the show notes, and use code Warner for 25% off. The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo, elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, to hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. I think so too, and that's there's a human element that will never be taken over. And trust me, I've had plenty of conversations. Here's the part where people start thinking I'm weird, but I've had plenty of conversations in the car with Gemini and with chat. We've got friends. I've used them as support counselors in some point and helped me walk through the situation. Conversations, not texting, but I talk to it. It talks back to me. I can adjust the voice. It's kind of fun talking with, the rock in your car as you're driving. But there's, when I'm done, I still pick up the phone and call a friend. I still pick up the phone and just say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's where I've kind of gotten to. Am I seeing this right? Right. And 100% of the time, that friend has given me a perspective that I didn't get myself and I didn't get through the AI bot. And then when I go back, and usually it's in relation to a person that I'm looking for help with on how to handle a situation, because I'm not the most warm fuzzy. I still need to sit with them and talk to them. It's not an email. It's not a voice memo that I'm sending over. It's still that person to person. So I agree with you 100%. I think that the person's there, and I look at all this technology to say it's going to get rid of the stuff that interrupts our individual relationship, that interrupts that human aspect of it.
Yep. The beautiful thing is, for a pretty reasonable cost, we can have a very gracious person, who's a highly trained professional. We've had architects and nurses and pharmacists working for us in other countries, and they're very trained, oftentimes more trained than the individuals that I interview and hire. And I want to reiterate, there's nothing that I have against hiring in-person people, and I have wanted to. And I'm not just hiring virtual people because they're less expensive. It was just I can't find them at the rate that I can find these highly qualified virtual people. And I can hire 2, sometimes 3 for the same cost as an in-person person. And so why plug up a whole bunch of area in my office where there's additional distraction, a lot of things going on, and need to have a bigger footprint for my practice as I continue to grow. But I can continue to grow way bigger without having as many people in the office. It reduces distraction. It makes that in-person that phone call that they're having with them a little more personable too. So,
well, I'm convinced that that this isn't a new concept. It's just a newly talked about concept, because I've always had an invisible team. My bookkeeper was never on site. In fact, I think the last bookkeeper I met was probably 12 years ago. I've talked to him on the phone. I've video conferenced with them, but I've never met them. It's always been a virtual relationship, and none of them
never
have lived
met
in the
my bookkeeper in person either.
No, none of them have lived in the state of California. My CPA, Jackson Pace, we just moved over to him, but he's the first bookkeeper I've met in person in about 12 years. And we just happened to be at a conference. We don't meet, regularly. Some of the clearinghouse stuff that we send our billing through, some of our billing people, right, they're not sitting in my office. So this invisible team has been there before. Now we're just expanding the capabilities. Is how I've kind of how I view it, and because I was worried too initially when I heard of this concept, saying, "Hey, I'm bypassing Americans and I'm red, white, and blue American." I said, "No, like this is just a natural expansion of what I've already done," and the hardest part of it was just me getting out of my own way, ripping off the Band-Aid, learning to trust others, and then realizing that, quite frankly, they do a lot better at what they do than I do at that same job.
Yeah. It's not an easy, I don't want to pretend that it's an easy transition. And that's why, I say how critical it is to develop a virtual mindset of we're doing this and we're not going to go back, which means that you're going to invest the resources, the time, and the people to make this new thing work, right? Those of us who, tried a dry eye treatment or procedure or something and then never really put the effort into it, saw it wasting on the side of the shelf and never really brought it in. But if you want something to work, you've got to invest time and training and resources to it. And that means that you're developing new policies and new procedures. Your SOPs have got to alter and change a little bit. And your team will have time to do that because they're spending less time on the phone or spending less time charting for themselves. And now the doctors can help the scribes be better. And then also, I think there needs to be somebody in office who is overseeing and leading that group of people, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 virtuals that you bring into the office. There needs to be somebody in office who is like, I'm in charge of this, and I'm going to meet with these people on a daily basis, maybe for it's 5 or 10 minutes, and just check in with them, right? Can you imagine going to work at a new job? And many of these virtuals tell me this, and like they meet with somebody once a week, and
nobody talks to them. It's weird.
And usually that meeting is about all the things they're doing wrong. So I have a heart for these virtuals, and fortunately, Corey at Team has done a great job of like helping support all of the virtuals. in spite of maybe the offices not being great at doing that, which they've created a culture of, I'm a virtual, you're a virtual, and once in a while they even physically get together and party together in,
Well, that's cool.
Argentina or Brazil, which has been a really, really cool thing for me to hear. I'm like, how do I get my virtuals up to Seattle, right? I want to fly them up here and hang out with them because we do have meetings together where we get everybody on at once. I've got like 8 people on the screen, and we talk about each other and what's happening, and that's been really cool having them be part of our in-office team, right? So we're even, my assistant has been working really hard here in the office to get a screen up on the wall and get a Zoom camera set up so that whoever's talking in the meeting can be seen by the virtuals. It's not something where we're having to steer the computer around, but have them be part of the meetings. Like, what's culturally important to you, and I need to have them, right? I invited my marketing team to be part of my myopia conversation with my team at my last meeting, just so that they could hear the things that we need to talk about and be more invested in it. But I can also have team meetings, and I don't have to shut down the phone because my virtual team's doing that in some ways. So having the leaders who can work with and enable what's happening is a really key component.
Yeah, absolutely. When you said a couple things that jarred my mind, and this is going to sound really dumb, but when I say it out loud, but I was talking with Mariana when I first started working with her, and asked her what she was doing for the 4th of July. Mariana's in Brazil. She's like, well, it's winter, so so it's kind of neat to learn some of those different cultural things. And then when festival comes up, and she's like, hey, can I have some time off here? And so it's kind of been fun. We've connected over soccer. My favorite Brazilian team is rivals with hers, so we talk a little bit of smack when there
you go
when those two are playing. But yeah, it's kind of fun. And again, I dumb American, just assume that the world revolves around us. So we had a good laugh over that. But you talk in the book about communication, and I think personally that's been my biggest growth opportunity is communicating, because it's how do I put my expectations out for my virtual team? How do I engage with them? How do I sometimes a lot of times the text doesn't do it. Obviously video calls are there, but it's really forced me to become a better communicator and articulate better my expectations and what good looks like and how good looks like. So I've become a much better leader through this process, just because I've had to learn to communicate better. Where I think in office, and it's not fair to them, but it was good enough was good enough. And now I've learned that it's not good enough, but there's better ways to do so. And I like how you walk through, a communication strategy in the book too. So clearly it wasn't just me that struggled with this.
No.
But I found that I've become better because of it.
Yeah, I think we all do, right? Is we look for additional ways of working with different types of people that grows us and stretches us. And, it used to be that you could just, as a leader, say, no, you're going to do it my way. But fortunately, that isn't the way that it's done anymore, and we need to evolve. And and across cultures, that's the case too. There's a large infrastructure of virtuals that are Filipino. That's probably the number one virtual assistant group in the arena of healthcare. And we've utilized a lot of individuals in the Philippines. Culturally, they communicate very differently than somebody, say, in Germany. I've got a virtual in Austria, and very different than people in Brazil and Argentina and El Salvador. And so I think that's also helpful. It makes you and your clinic and who you are as a leader a little bit better. But there's a lot of advantages to working across those different regions to bring different things and make your practice more diverse. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. No, 100%. So hopefully, if you're listening, you're going, okay, stop talking, guys. I want to read the book. So I've put a link to order the book in the show notes. Dave, just kind of help us, as we start wrapping up, really what the intent is, what your hope is when somebody's reading this, if they want to pull the trigger and say, hey, I want to build my invisible team, really what are the next action steps? And then I don't think I've shared this with you, but you mentioned some of the HIPAA concerns that are around. So I've been talking with Corey, and I know that they're double checking everything with their legal team. They have already, and we're good. Joe DeLoach and the practice compliance, the practice performance partners under PCS have done their due diligence and done right, as you've addressed in the book. There's nothing to worry about. Again, done right. So we'll do an episode with them. But those who are kind of on the fence, obviously get the book, read it. It's the Martha Stewart cookbook of building your invisible team. So Dave's now our Martha Stewart of optometry. But what's your hope with this?
Yeah. So what I'm hopeful for is, I'd love the book to be helpful for everybody. But if you don't read the book and you're like, hey, I'm sold on this idea of, bringing some virtuals into my office, then I think the key components that hopefully, if you read the book, you'll see, but even hearing from us, is developing a virtual mindset, and you're not going to fail. You're going to go all in. Hiring to concept is a really big key, is like if you're going to hire multiple people for the same role, develop an in-office team person who's going to help oversee the project. And then there's another concept that's really important, is that if something's going on wrong, always blame your office first. Don't blame the virtual. Always blame the office first, because it's most likely you that is the problem. And a real important aspect that I think, so those couple of things have, I think, really set people up for success when I've consulted with them and worked with them in growing their practice. I don't consult on bringing in virtual teams, but consulting with people on the idea and the concept. And then the other thing, I think, is if you're going to be looking for an agency, we're big fans, both of us, utilize Team. And there's some reasons for that, beyond that we like this Corey guy who owns the company. But I worked with another agency, and they didn't pay my virtuals, and I lost several of them. And so I couldn't stay with that agency because I was having to pay additional extra directly to my virtuals so they wouldn't quit because the agency wasn't taking care of them. There was another agency that's very well known in the eye care space, and I've heard great things from other people who use them. But when I went to interview, sometimes the candidate was already taken and put in another job. So it was like whoever interviewed the person first. What I like about the team concept is they go and they get 3 or 4 individuals. They schedule a time with me and they say, we'll have 3 or 4 candidates for you on this day. And I already have it scheduled to interview them. I interview those people, and if I don't like any of them, then I say, no, go back and try again. Or I actually want to hire 2 of these people. Sometimes is what happens. So that's a real key differentiator, and most of our virtuals now are in South America. We have had somebody in the Philippines, which was a scribe, which is why we don't scribe anymore in the Philippines, who fell asleep in the middle of the exam.
No.
And great guy, but it was Monday, and he had just done the overnight, and now he was in the middle of the night his time and was having to try to adjust again because on the weekends he didn't keep those time zones.
Right.
But,
that's tough.
So the time zone issue has really been helpful. We still have 2 virtuals that are in the Philippines. They just work different hours, and that works great for them. Other people don't have those problems always, but I have far less of an issue with my phone calling in my hours as well as my scribing in my hours with South American. And I get really good success with Team because that's largely where they source. They do source in the Philippines and around the country, and they're constantly looking at multiple different factors that indicate where a virtual person is going to come from. Most recently, there was a country that they didn't source from because there's some economic instability that is happening there. I still have a virtual in there, but that virtual has come to me and said, hey, my finances are changing a little bit. Do you think I can have a raise for my governmental issues that are going on and my instability of my government? And so teams looking at that and they're saying, hey, we're going to change where we're sourcing from to make sure the stability of countries is really shaking out. So the agency with which you select is a really key component. And you can go out and find an agency that can get you somebody for very inexpensive from a country maybe that's not a great country for virtuals, right? Or you can go to an agency where maybe you're paying a little bit more, but it's still well within the realm of what we can afford in small healthcare offices. And then I think the other aspect that we have to keep in mind is the tech stack of what you all need. And you don't need a lot. Lean heavily on the agency that you work with, and team does a great job with this. Corey was in the IT sector for a long time. So what do you need to build out so that you can communicate and actually have phone calls with these people and so forth? And you can lean on your agency to help you do that. My prior agencies didn't, and my in-office lead spent like 3 weeks trying to figure out phone systems and IT and VoIP systems and all of this stuff. She was like, she knew far more than most sales reps in the area by the time that we were done, but it worked. So that's a real big thing now that great agencies will help you with as well. So my hope is that the 5 pressure points that are crushing small healthcare practices, you can find some relief. So maybe you don't have to text to your husband or your wife as much as I'll be home soon.
Yeah. Happier life, happier practice, happier spouse, and less budget on the flowers. So at least the apology flowers, right?
That's right.
Very well said. And again, if you're listening, the agency we're referring to is Team TEEM, not Team TEAM. We use those words interchangeably. And like you, we did extensive research into why, and happy to chat offline, or you can look for other episodes we've done where we've talked about why on that episode we chose that particular agency. But Dave, really appreciate your time. Looking forward to seeing you in Nashville here in a couple of weeks. Big success to you for your upcoming Seattle Educational Conference that you're putting on. And as a friend, as a colleague, I appreciate all the work that you do, because without folks like you and others like you that do that kind of work for us as a community, I think we'd be not nearly at the level we are at today. So I appreciate your time, your effort, and just your mug collection as well.
Thanks for letting me be on the podcast, buddy.